So it's gonna be a little bit different than the previous talk, which was really good. Let's start introducing the team. We both work in the visual journalism team. That's a really big team. It's around 200 people. There's people, designers from TV. There's also designers like us that work mostly for the website. I'm from the design and UX team and also the data journalism team like Nassos, and we have very different backgrounds. There's reporters, designers, developers. We all work a little bit doing design and developing a little bit programming or writing. At the very end of the day, we do very similar things. And funnily enough, for this meetup, none of us is a cartographer. We do love maps, but yes, we don't have a background in cartography, which sometimes creates issues.
Cool, so just to take you through a few of the maps we make. Basically, we make all the maps, all different types of maps. Sort of bottom right, you can see sort of election maps, data maps, choropleth maps, mapping sort of areas of control in Syria, satellite maps working sort of to explain a route. You've got up in the top a spinning globe that we'll talk a little bit about. So basically, we just kind of, as we'll go through a bit later, we're not tied to sort of a particular type of map. It's sort of working across the news. It's whatever helps the audience and helps our audience understand the story better. So whatever's the best way of visually showing a story to help our audience get a better understanding of what's happened in the news and explaining the news, that's kind of what we'll go with. We're obviously sort of, that would obviously try and follow sort of design principles and data journalism and all that, but essentially at the end of the day, it's whatever helps the audience understand the story better. And that's sort of what is at the core of what map we decide to make for a particular story. So yeah, we'll go through all the different, the main types of maps that we work on now.
So I would say that most of our maps is actually localizing events. So usually when we work during the day, there's a person who is doing live news, so live graphics that are done during the day. Then we also do translations for the world service, for the different services of the BBC, and then there's people who is doing projects. And when you get to do live news, most of what you do is maps, because when something happens, the first thing that you want to know is where that thing has happened. Whatever is a ferry sinking in Norway, or the melting of the Antarctic, or a terrorist attack. So the first thing that you need to do is a locator, and it tends to be done quite quickly, and as the day goes by and you have more information, you keep adding layers to it.
And a different type of map is what I've kind of grouped as data-driven maps. These could be sort of point maps, choropleth maps, a few different types, but essentially this are maps where we've got a little bit more time to play with, where we're not talking sort of something's happened here, how can we build a locator map? Essentially the key to a data-driven map is where geography is kind of key to the story. So we'd want to visualize what's happened, whether it's incidents. As you can see in this map, it's a few different things are happening. It would be the number of people who have sort of died in sort of different boat sinkings, as well as locations of cemeteries over the Mediterranean. So a few different layers on top of it. What the aim of it, what we call a data-driven map, would be is to kind of help people identify the pattern of the story, and also in a choropleth map, for example, if we're looking at things like drug use across the UK or election maps, it would help people identify how one area compares to the rest of the sort of world, the rest of the country, based on geography. A key thing here, I know we're sort of going to talk. We're talking all about maps. Not all data sort of should be mapped. We do get a lot of sort of requests that come in. Can we have a map on this? Not everything is made to be visualized as a map, so we try and bat those away whenever we can. Another type of map that we tend to do is satellite maps. So we've tried to try and stop this. Distracting. So we've sort of remote sensing and working with satellite data is something we've developed in the last few years a little bit more. I think in particular with major events and natural disasters, that's something that lends itself much more to a satellite map than a sort of plain locator map. We use imagery from different satellite providers to kind of show something that's happened on the ground and try and visualize that using their imagery, as well as Landsat and other sources to do that, whoever's sort of familiar with satellite data. What it can do, for example, like in this case here it can show, it can be used to show changes over time. So you can see here where on the one side we're looking at the glacier in the early 90s, and then as you swipe it, sort of 2018. So this shows the retreat of ice in that glacier over a sort of 15-year period. That's longer than 15, 25-year period. So essentially, we can use that sort of a static image or interactive sliders if the map is if the two areas we're looking at to compare change over time are in exactly the same location. We could use a interactive slider so the audience can sort of swipe through and see the change, as in this example. We can also use satellite maps to as kind of better locator maps if terrain or the sort of area is key to the story. Let's say we're mapping sort of something to do with the Amazon, a satellite base map might be better than a standard sort of base map. So that's another way we'd integrate satellite maps into our mapping.
You got a spoiler. So we were speaking about this before with Ben. We use basically anything that suits the story. There's people who are very comfortable with R or with QGIS or Carto. Then there's people who might just want to use our in-house tool, which is Google Maps, but with the style of the BBC. So this one, for example, is something that we use very often when we want to do those live maps, because it's really quick, it's really fast. You just type the place you want to highlight, and then you export it in PNG. You also get that locator over there, indicating where in the board you're zooming in. But basically, it's just the person who is doing the map, deciding what is the best tool. It also really depends on what type of project you're working on. If it's data-driven, you will probably use R or QGIS or Carto or whatever you have close by. And sometimes we get to do more bespoke projects that take more time, and you can get to explore a little bit more. So for example, for this one, it was for our climate change project. We had more time and we wanted to do something more interactive, something that could make people stay in the project and interact with it, and kind of highlight how big the climate change problem is. So our developer Alexander started playing with different options, first with an SVG and kind of moving it around. It wasn't very, it didn't work very well. So at the end, we did, he did a 3D globe with 3GS, which is based in WebGL, and we are really happy with this globe.
Another thing we've done recently is, if you're familiar with the Ordnance Survey, they released a they made open source a kind of set of tiles for the entire UK, which we've used and integrated, added a little bit of a BBC theme to it as well. It's amazing that they've sort of open sourced this kind of wealth of data and wealth of layers. It goes to an extremely granular. I'll stop this again. Sorry, I'll keep on spoiling. I think that might just play forever. So what we did with this is kind of, because we, as a BBC, so we couldn't use a third-party source in the way that they'd put the tiles on a live server, so we had to host them ourselves, which we sort of was a bit of a fiddle till we sort of figured out exactly how to do it, but we're now hosting the Ordnance Surveys tiles on our AWS server, which they sort of helped out with. The benefit of something like this, a sort of Slippy Map tile system, is that it allows kind of a really large volume of data, but we can sort of build a custom UX onto it. As you can see here, we could sort of build the map legend. It's a lookup where it matches up to the data. We could add layers of data on top of it. You can search for your postcode. It will change by if you select a different age range or a different number of bedrooms. So it allows a lot of functionality and is really, really quick to get to the layer you want, to get to the area you want, basically. And what we've done with this dataset is that what's great with this dataset is that we can tweak the styles for different base maps just by adjusting a JSON file, which is really, really useful for us. We don't have to sort of reproduce the whole map and rebuild the base map and export it. We can just adjust the JSON file for a sort of dark mode, a different, a sort of lighter mode, and things like that. So that's come in handy.
And sometimes doing maps is actually difficult, not only because of technical issues, but also because borders are tricky. Some countries have very hard legislation regarding borders. For example, India is one of them. This is the Kashmir area, and we have to allow every map in the BBC has to align with a specific way of portraying borders, no matter if it's India, Sudan, etc. And we just have to be very careful with that, because people take lines very seriously.
I guess this is sort of a summary of how sort of to follow on with the difficulties we face, not just in terms of borders. Maps are fancy and people like them, so we get a lot of sort of questions, can you make a map for us? So we kind of need to decide where it's relevant. We also need to decide which map is best and how exactly to make it. And then there's all the other things to think about, projections and locator and scales to do with sort of points and the type of map, data availability, formats like CDFs and rasters and all that stuff. And then there's the biggest enemy of all, deadlines, which we're often kind of working to when do you want this ready? It's kind of yesterday sort of thing is the answer. So we try and bring all those together and be as creative as we can with longer term projects, and be as hopefully concise and clear as we can with the shorter term, here's where something happened, locator maps, or try and tell the story in the best possible way using maps. We're always sort of trying to learn more about different techniques. A lot of the climate change stuff we've done is using sort of more analysis on climate data and combining different climate data sets. So we're trying to do much more of that, much more of the analysis using sort of R and the command line and things like that, as well as the visualization side of mapping. So yeah.
We didn't include goodbye slide, but thank you.